The wealthy woman's hand connected with Zara's face, so hard that the entire charity gala went silent, but it was the thin line of blood trailing down her cheek that made everything freeze. 300 people watched the African immigrant server girl stumble backward, and not one of them knew she was wearing a secret that would destroy reputations, end business empires, and reveal that the most dangerous man in Seoul had chosen her. Then his voice cut through the
Let her go.
But she...
Now.
hit subscribe to Afro Soul Stories because this is just the beginning. The champagne flute shattered against the marble floor, silencing the entire ballroom in an instant. Zara felt the sting across her cheek before she registered what had happened. Mrs. Lee stood over her, hands still raised, eyes blazing with contempt. The wealthy woman's diamond bracelet had caught Zara's skin, leaving a thin line of blood trailing down to her jaw. "How dare you, Mrs. Lee hissed, her voice dripping with venom. "You filthy African. You think you can touch my hanbok with your dirty hands." Zara's trembling fingers were still holding the champagne tray. She hadn't touched anyone's hanbok. She had simply walked past Mrs. Lee to serve drinks to the other guests at this ridiculously opulent charity gala in the heart of Seoul's Gangnam district. But explaining that now seemed impossible. Her throat had closed up, and 300 pairs of eyes were burning into her skin. The ballroom at the Shilla Hotel stretched endlessly in all directions, all glittering chandeliers and gold-trimmed everything. Zara had been working these events for 4 months now, ever since she'd added this third job to her already exhausting schedule. She needed the money. The tiny gashiwon she rented in Noan cost more than she'd ever imagined, and the remittances she sent back to Nairobi were barely enough to cover her younger sister's university fees. "I'm so sorry," Zara whispered, bowing her head. The words tasted like ash in her mouth, but she'd learned that apologizing was easier than fighting back. Fighting back meant losing the job, and she couldn't afford that. Mrs. Lee wasn't finished. She grabbed Zara's arm, her perfectly manicured nails digging into flesh. "Sorry, you people come here, take our jobs, spread your filth, and you think sorry is enough." Zara tried to pull away, but Mrs. Lee's grip tightened. The tray tilted dangerously in her other hand. She could feel tears burning behind her eyes, could hear the whispers spreading through the crowd like wildfire. No one was stepping forward to help. No one ever did. Then a voice cut through the tension, like a blade through silk. "Let her go." The words were quiet, almost conversational, but they carried a weight that made everyone in the vicinity turn. Zara looked up through her tears and saw him standing there, the man she'd been trying not to look at all evening. Min-jun Park. Even in this room full of Seoul's elite, he stood out. Not because of his perfectly tailored suit or the Patek Philippe on his wrist, but because of the way people instinctively created space around him. Like he carried his own gravity. Mrs. Lee's face went pale. "Mr. Park, I said let her go." His dark eyes hadn't moved from Mrs. Lee's hand on Zara's arm. Now. The grip released instantly. Zara stumbled backward, barely catching the tray before the remaining glasses crashed to the floor. Her heart was hammering so hard, she thought it might burst through her ribs. Min-jun moved forward and Mrs. Lee actually took a step back. He reached out, and for a terrifying second, Zara thought he was going to touch her face, to inspect the cut from the bracelet. Instead, his hand went to her left wrist, lifting it gently but deliberately. His thumb pressed against the thin fabric of her server's glove, right where the band of platinum sat hidden beneath. "This woman," he said, his voice carrying across the silent ballroom, "is my fiancée." The words detonated like a bomb. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Mrs. Lee looked like she might faint. Zara felt her knees go weak. "Min-jun, no," she whispered, but he wasn't looking at her anymore. He was staring down Mrs. Lee with an expression that made the temperature in the room drop 10 degrees. "You just assaulted my future wife," he continued, his tone conversational but laced with something dark. "In front of 300 witnesses. I wonder what your husband would say. Or perhaps more importantly, what the business community would say about his firm being associated with someone who physically attacks service workers at charity events." Mrs. Lee's mouth opened and closed like a fish. "I didn't know, I swear I would never." "You would never if you knew she was protected," Min-jun interrupted. "But you had no problem doing it when you thought she was just another African immigrant worker. You could abuse without consequences." He paused, letting that sink in. That tells me everything I need to know about your character, Mrs. Lee. Zara's mind was spinning. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. They'd agreed to keep it secret, to wait until the time was right, until things were safer. The ring she wore hidden under her glove was supposed to stay hidden. But now Min-jun had just announced their engagement to half of Seoul's upper class, and she could already see phones being pulled out, messages being sent, social media posts being composed. Min-jun turned to her finally, and his expression softened in a way she'd never seen in public before. "We're leaving," he said simply. Then he looked at the event coordinator, who was hovering nearby looking absolutely terrified. "Miss Okonkwo is done for the evening. I trust there will be no issue with her final payment, including a substantial bonus for her trouble tonight." "Of course, Mr. Park, absolutely whatever you." But Min-jun was already guiding Zara toward the exit, his hand firm but gentle on the small of her back. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, everyone pressing back to give them space. Zara could hear the whispers starting up again, louder now, speculation and shock and disbelief. They made it to the hallway before Zara's legs finally gave out. Min-jun caught her easily, sweeping her up into his arms like she weighed nothing. She should have protested, should have insisted she could walk, but she was shaking too hard. "I'm sorry," he murmured against her hair as he carried her toward the private elevator. "I know we agreed to wait, but I couldn't stand there and watch her hurt you." "You just painted a target on my back," Zara whispered. "Your enemies, your business rivals, anyone who wants to get to you, they'll come after me now. Let them try." His voice went hard again. "I'll destroy anyone who touches you." The elevator doors closed, sealing them in privacy. Min-jun set her down gently, but kept his hands on her waist, steadying her. Zara looked up at him, this man who terrified half of Seoul's business community, who commanded respect and fear in equal measure, who had somehow decided that she, of all people, was worth protecting. "How did this even happen?" she asked, not for the first time. "How did we get here?" Min-jun smiled, a rare genuine expression that transformed his usually stern features. "You want the whole story? We have time. The car won't be here for a few minutes." Zara nodded, leaning into his warmth. She knew the story, had lived it, but she needed to hear him tell it. Needed to confirm this was real, and not some fever dream brought on by exhaustion and fear. "8 months ago," Min-jun began, his thumb tracing absent circles on her hip, "I was bleeding out in a parking garage in Iriwin, fairly certain I was going to die there." Zara remembered that night with crystal clarity. She'd been finishing her shift at the restaurant, cutting through the parking garage as a shortcut to the subway station. She'd almost missed him in the shadows, would have if not for the sound of his labored breathing. He'd been slumped against a concrete pillar, blood soaking through his white shirt, his face pale as death. The smart thing would have been to walk away. Call the police maybe, but definitely not get involved. In her 8 months in Seoul, Zara had learned that getting involved in things that weren't your business was a good way to end up deported or worse. But she'd looked at this stranger and seen her own father, who'd died 3 years earlier because no one had stopped to help when he'd collapsed in the street from a heart attack. She'd pressed her scarf against his wound, called an ambulance, stayed with him even when he'd tried to wave her off with blood-stained hands. "Go," he'd rasped in Korean. "Not safe, they might come back." "Then we'd better hope the ambulance gets here first," she'd replied in her broken Korean, pressing harder to staunch the bleeding. The paramedics had arrived 6 minutes later. The police had come too, asking questions Zara couldn't fully answer in Korean. She'd given her statement through a translator, left her contact information, and gone home, not expecting to hear anything more about it. 2 weeks later, an envelope had arrived at her Gashiwin. Inside was enough cash to cover 3 months of rent and a note written in sharp, precise handwriting in English. "For the hospital bills you refuse to let me pay. Stay away from me, it's not safe." Zara should have listened. Should have taken the money and forgotten about the bleeding stranger in the parking garage. Instead, she'd tracked down the hospital he'd been taken to, sweet-talked a nurse into confirming he'd survived, and felt a weight lift off her chest she hadn't known was there. 3 days after that, he'd shown up at the restaurant where she worked her lunch shift. He'd sat at a corner table, ordered nothing but tea, and watched her work for an hour before she finally got her break and marched over to him. "You're supposed to be staying away from me," she'd said in English, crossing her arms. "Isn't that what your note said?" "I said you should stay away from me," he'd corrected in perfect English. I never promised I'd stay away from you. That's not how this works. How it works? This thing where you send me money and warnings, and then show up anyway. Zara had pulled out the chair across from him and sat down without invitation. Who are you, anyway, and who were the people who stabbed you? He'd studied her for a long moment, something calculating in his dark eyes. If I tell you, you'll run. Try me. My name is Min-jun Park. The people who stabbed me were associates of the Jade Dragon Syndicate. They were upset about a business deal that didn't go their way. Zara had heard of the Jade Dragon Syndicate. Everyone in Seoul had. They were one of the biggest criminal organizations in South Korea, involved in everything from illegal gambling to drug trafficking to loan sharking. Which meant Min-jun was either law enforcement or, "You're a criminal," she'd said flatly. "I prefer businessmen, but yes, my business interests occasionally conflict with local law." He'd leaned forward. "Still want to sit here and have tea with me?" Zara should have run. Instead, she'd poured herself a cup from his pot and said, "Tell me about these business interests." That first conversation had lasted 3 hours, until her manager had threatened to fire her if she didn't get back to work. Min-jun had left a tip that was more than she made in a week and an invitation to dinner that Friday. She'd said no. Then yes. Then no again when she'd looked up exactly who Min-jun Park was and realized he wasn't just involved with criminals. He was one of the most powerful underground figures in Seoul. He controlled entertainment districts, owned legitimate businesses that laundered money from less legitimate enterprises, and had connections that reached from Busan to Tokyo to Hong Kong. But he'd kept showing up. At the restaurant. At the building where she cleaned offices in the early mornings. At the events where she worked serving champagne to people who looked through her like she was invisible. He never pushed, never demanded. Just appeared and talked to her like she was a person worth knowing, worth listening to, worth spending time with. "You wore me down," Zara said now, in the elevator completing the memory. "I kept trying to be smart, to protect myself, and you just kept showing up." "You saved my life," Min-jun replied. "No one had done that before. Not without wanting something in return. You didn't even know who I was, and you still helped me. So you decided to make me a target?" "I decided to make you mine." He cupped her face gently, careful of the cut on her cheek. "And yes, that comes with risks. But it also comes with my protection, my resources, and apparently my complete inability to watch someone hurt you without losing my mind." The elevator opened into the private parking garage. A black Genesis G90 was already waiting, Min-jun's driver standing at attention by the rear door. Min-jun guided Zara into the back seat, sliding in beside her. "Take us home," he told the driver in Korean. "The long way, and make sure we're not followed." As the car pulled out into Seoul's glittering nighttime streets, Zara finally allowed herself to pull off the thin black glove she'd been wearing. The platinum ring caught the passing streetlights, throwing off sparks of light. It was beautiful, simple, elegant, impossibly expensive. Min-jun had given it to her 3 months ago, in the kitchen of his penthouse apartment in Hanam-dong, with no ceremony, no grand gesture. Just him on one knee, the ring in his palm, and a simple question in English. "Will you marry me?" She'd said yes before her brain could catch up with her heart. And then she'd asked if they could keep it quiet, just for a while, until things were more stable. Until she could be sure this was real, and not some beautiful dream that would shatter the moment reality crashed in. Min-jun had agreed without hesitation. The ring was hers, the engagement was real, but they'd keep it private. For safety, they'd said. For discretion. So much for that plan. "What happens now?" Zara asked, watching the city blur past. "Mrs. Lee will tell everyone. By morning, this will be all over social media, the news everywhere." "Yes," Min-jun agreed calmly. "Your business partners will know, your rivals, the police probably." "Undoubtedly." "Min-jun, I'm serious. This changes everything." He took her hand, the one wearing the ring, and brought it to his lips. "Good, I'm tired of hiding what you mean to me. Tired of watching you work 3 jobs when you should be spending your time however you want. Tired of pretending you're not the most important person in my life." "The most important person in your life is a broke Kenyan immigrant who cleans toilets for a living," Zara said, but she was smiling despite herself. "The most important person in my life is a woman who saw someone bleeding out and didn't walk away. Who works herself to exhaustion to send money home to her family. Who tells me when I'm being an arrogant ass and means it? He kissed her knuckles. The fact that you're also beautiful, brilliant, and terrible at Baduk is just a bonus. Zara laughed, the sound surprising her. An hour ago, she'd been getting slapped in front of hundreds of people. Now she was laughing in the back of a car with a man who should terrify her, but somehow made her feel safer than she'd ever been. You're insane, she told him. Probably, he agreed. But I'm your insane fiancé now, and everyone knows it. No more hiding, Zara. No more pretending. Tomorrow, I'm going to make this official, make sure everyone understands what it means to be associated with me. And if anyone has a problem with it, they can take it up with me directly. The car pulled up to Min-jun's building, a sleek glass tower in Hanamdong that probably cost more than Zara could earn in 10 lifetimes. The doorman greeted them both by name now, another change from the early days when he'd looked at her like she was in the wrong place. In the elevator up to the penthouse, Zara caught sight of herself in the mirrored walls. She still wore the black server's uniform, her natural hair pulled back in a neat bun, the cut on her cheek already starting to bruise. She looked exactly like what she was, a worker, an immigrant, someone who didn't belong in a place like this. Except she was wearing a platinum engagement ring and leaning against a man who could buy this entire building without blinking. The contrast was so absurd, it almost made her laugh again. The penthouse was dark and quiet. Min-jun flicked on the lights, revealing the space that had become surprisingly familiar over the past few months. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Han River. Minimalist furniture that probably cost a fortune. Art on the walls that Zara had learned to appreciate, even if she didn't always understand it. Sit, Min-jun instructed, guiding her to the couch. Let me look at that cut. He disappeared into the bathroom and returned with a first aid kit. Zara watched as he knelt in front of her, carefully cleaning the wound with antiseptic. His hands were steady, gentle, the same hands that had reportedly broken a man's arm last month for trying to cheat him in a business deal. It's not deep, he murmured. Won't even scar, probably. Good, I'd hate to have to explain to people that Mrs. Lee gave me a permanent souvenir. Min-jun's jaw tightened. She's going to regret tonight for a very long time. Don't do anything crazy, Zara warned. I know you want to, but… I'm not going to hurt her, he interrupted. I don't hurt civilians, no matter how much they might deserve it. But her husband's company relies on several contracts with entertainment venues that happen to be under my protection. And several of her favorite charities receive donations from my various business entities. It would be a shame if all of that suddenly dried up. Min-jun. She put her hands on you, Zara. She drew blood. I'm not letting that pass. Zara sighed but didn't argue further. She knew that look in his eyes, that set to his jaw. Min-jun Park didn't make idle threats, and he didn't forgive easily. Mrs. Lee had made an enemy tonight, and she didn't even fully realize how much that was going to cost her. What about the other stuff? Zara asked. The announcement, going public, your people aren't going to like this. My people will deal with it. He finished bandaging her cheek and sat back on his heels. Anyone who has a problem can leave my organization. I've been building succession plans anyway. It's time to start stepping back from some of the more hands-on aspects of the business. This was news. Stepping back. I'm getting married, Zara. I want to actually be around to enjoy it, not constantly looking over my shoulder for the next assassination attempt. He stood, pulling her up with him. I've been in this life for 15 years, made more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. It's time to transition to more legitimate operations, leave the dangerous stuff to younger, hungrier people. Just like that, you can just decide to leave. It's not overnight, will take a year, maybe 2, to fully extract myself. But yes, I'm leaving, for you, for us, for whatever life we're going to build together. Zara felt tears burning behind her eyes again, but for completely different reasons now. You barely know me. I know you saved my life. I know you didn't ask for anything in return. I know you work yourself to exhaustion for your family. I know you make terrible kimchi jjigae but excellent sukuma wiki. I know you're terrified of horror movies but pretend you're not. I know when you smile, really smile, it feels like the sun coming out. He pulled her close. I know enough, Zara, more than enough. She buried her face in his chest, breathing in his scent, expensive cologne and something uniquely him. This is crazy, we're crazy. Probably, he agreed for the second time that night. But I'd rather be crazy with you than sane and alone. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. then buzzed again. And again. Zara pulled it out and saw the flood of notifications. Messages from coworkers, from friends, from people she barely knew. Screenshots of social media posts, news articles already going up, speculation and gossip and shock. It's already everywhere, she said, scrolling through. Look, mystery woman revealed as Park's fiancé criminal Kingpin's secret love oh god. They found my Facebook profile. They're posting pictures of my family in Kenya. Min-jun took the phone from her hand and tossed it onto the couch. Tomorrow, I'll have my security team handle it. They'll scrub what they can, protect your family's privacy, make sure no one harasses them. Tonight, just be here with me. How are you so calm about this? Because I've been preparing for this moment since the day I put that ring on your finger. He guided her toward the bedroom. I knew eventually we'd have to go public. I'd hoped for better circumstances, but I'm not upset that it happened. If anything, I'm relieved. No more hiding, no more pretending. Just us together and everyone knows it. Zara let him lead her into the bedroom, let him help her out of the server's uniform she'd been wearing. He gave her one of his shirts to sleep in, soft and expensive and smelling like him. They lay in bed together, her head on his chest, his arms wrapped around her like a shield. I love you, she whispered into the darkness. I don't think I've said that enough. You've said it plenty. His hand stroked through her hair. But I never get tired of hearing it. I love you, she repeated. Even though you're a criminal. Even though you just made my life infinitely more complicated. Even though this is probably the worst idea I've ever had. I love you too, he replied. My brave, beautiful, completely insane fiancé. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, while Seoul's social media erupted with speculation and shock about the criminal Kingpin and his secret engagement to a poor African immigrant worker. The next morning, Zara woke to find Min-jun already awake, sitting up in bed with his laptop, handling the fallout. He'd ordered breakfast, real breakfast, not the instant ramyeon she usually lived on, and coffee that actually tasted good. Your sister called, he said without looking up from the screen. I answered. She's very excited about the wedding. You answered my sister's call. Zara scrambled for her phone. Min-jun, what did you tell her? That I'm in love with her sister and plan to marry her as soon as possible. Also that we'll fly her and your mother to Seoul for the ceremony, all expenses paid, and that I'm looking forward to meeting them. He finally looked at her, smiling. She seems nice, asked if I was treating you well, threatened to come to Korea and deal with me herself if I wasn't. That sounds like Amani. Zara dialed her sister back, preparing for the interrogation. The conversation lasted an hour. Her sister wanted to know everything: how they'd met when they'd gotten engaged, why Zara hadn't told her sooner. Zara explained as much as she could, without revealing the full truth about Min-jun's business. Her family didn't need to know those details. Not yet, maybe not ever. He seems like a good man, Amani said finally. Different from what I imagined for you, but good. He makes you happy. Yes, Amani, he makes me very happy. Then that's all that matters. Love is rare, Zara. When you find it, you hold on, no matter what anyone else says. Mama would have said the same thing. After the call, Zara found Min-jun in the living room, talking to someone on his own phone in rapid Korean, too fast for her to follow. His tone was cold and commanding. Business then. The kind she wasn't supposed to ask about. He ended the call and turned to her. Security team is in place. They'll be with you whenever you leave the building. Non-negotiable. Min-jun. Zara, please. I just announced to the entire city that you're important to me. That makes you a target for everyone who wants to hurt me. Let me protect you. She wanted to argue, wanted to insist she didn't need bodyguards following her around. But she could see the fear behind his calm exterior, the genuine worry that something might happen to her. And after last night, after feeling Mrs. Lee's hand across her face, maybe having some protection wasn't the worst idea. Okay, she agreed. But they have to be discreet. I'm not having some huge guy in a suit following me into the convenience store. They'll be discreet, he promised. You won't even know they're there. Over the following weeks, Zara's life transformed in ways she was still struggling to process. She'd quit her 3 jobs, Min-jun had insisted, and honestly, she'd been too exhausted to argue. The tiny Gashiwan in Noan was replaced by a spare bedroom in Min-jun's penthouse, though she spent most nights in his room anyway. Her sister's university fees were paid in full, and there was enough money set up in an account to cover any future expenses for her family. It should have felt like a fairy tale. In many ways it did. But there were complications too. Some of Min-jun's business associates weren't happy about their engagement. There were meetings she wasn't allowed to attend, conversations that stopped when she entered a room. Min-jun was keeping her separate from that part of his life, and while she appreciated it, she also worried about what it meant. Then there were the social aspects. Mrs. Lee wasn't the only person in Seoul's upper class who had opinions about Min-jun marrying a poor African immigrant. The gossip was vicious, the speculation cruel. Zara tried not to read it, but it was everywhere. Social media, news sites, even overheard conversations when she went out. Gold digger, they called her. Opportunist, he'll get bored and move on to someone more appropriate. Why would he choose a black woman when he could have anyone? Min-jun handled each slight with cold precision. Business deals fell through for people who'd been particularly nasty. Donations dried up for charities whose board members had made comments. He never threatened, never made scenes, but somehow people who crossed the line found their lives becoming mysteriously more difficult. You don't have to fight every battle for me, Zara told him one night, after he'd casually mentioned that a prominent socialite's husband had lost a major contract. Yes, I do, he replied simply. They need to understand that disrespecting you has consequences. 3 months after the Gala incident, Min-jun came home early one afternoon and told Zara to put on her nicest dress. Why? She asked suspiciously. We're getting married today, right now. Zara stared at him. What? I'm tired of waiting, tired of planning some big ceremony that neither of us wants. I want you to be my wife, Zara, today, so I've arranged everything. Small ceremony, just us and a few witnesses, unless you want something bigger. No, Zara said immediately. No, this is perfect. This is exactly what I want. They were married in Min-jun's penthouse, with the city spread out below them and the sun setting over the Han River. The only witnesses were Min-jun's most trusted associate and Zara's friend from her restaurant days, both sworn to secrecy until they were ready to announce it. The ceremony lasted 50 minutes. Min-jun's vows were short and to the point, promises of protection, love, and a lifetime together, delivered in both Korean and English. Zara's were longer, more emotional, stumbling over words as tears streamed down her face. When it was done, when they were officially husband and wife, Min-jun kissed her like they were the only two people in the world. And for that perfect moment they were. I love you, Mrs. Park, he murmured against her lips. I love you too, she replied. My criminal Kingpin husband. He laughed, that rare, genuine sound she'd learned to treasure. Reformed criminal Kingpin, thank you very much. I'm going legitimate, remember. Still counts, she teased. They spent their wedding night in the penthouse, just the two of them, the city lights twinkling below. Tomorrow, they'd announce the marriage. Tomorrow, there would be more gossip, more speculation, more people with opinions about their relationship. But tonight was theirs, perfect and private and full of promise. 6 months later, Zara stood in a different ballroom at a different charity gala. But this time, she wasn't wearing a server's uniform. She wore a dress that cost more than she used to make in a year, diamonds at her throat, her wedding ring gleaming on her finger. And when she walked into the room on Min-jun's arm, heads turned, not because she was invisible, but because she was impossible to ignore. Mrs. Lee was there, across the room, looking significantly less confident than the last time they'd met. When their eyes met, the woman actually flinched and looked away. Min-jun noticed. Want me to say something to her? No, Zara replied, squeezing his hand. She's not worth it, she never was. They made their way through the crowd, Min-jun introducing Zara to people who actually listened when she spoke now, who treated her like a person worth knowing. It was strange how a ring and a name could change everything and nothing at the same time. She was still the same woman who'd saved a bleeding stranger in a parking garage. But now people saw her differently. Later that night, back in their penthouse, Zara kicked off her heels and collapsed onto the couch. I'm exhausted. How do you do this all the time? Practice, Min-jun said, joining her. And usually, I have you to make it bearable. Sweet talker. It's true. He pulled her feet into his lap, massaging them gently. You make everything better, Zara, even boring charity galas. She looked at him, this man who had turned her entire life upside down, who had shown her that love could be fierce and protective and all-consuming, who had chosen her, of all people, to build a life with. Thank you, she said softly. For what? For showing up at that restaurant, for not giving up when I kept saying no, for defending me when I needed it, for loving me. Min-jun set her feet down and moved closer, pulling her into his arms. Thank you for saving my life, for seeing past what I was to who I could be with you, for saying yes, for loving me back. They sat like that for a long time, wrapped in each other, watching the city lights twinkle outside their window. The journey from that parking garage to this moment had been strange and terrifying and beautiful. But Zara wouldn't change a single moment of it, because in the end, love was worth the risk, worth the fear, worth everything. And if you've made it this far in our story, thank you for taking this journey with us. If you enjoyed seeing Zara and Min-jun defy every expectation, break through every barrier, and prove that love sees no borders, hit that like button right now. Drop a comment telling us what moment got you the most. Was it the slap, the ring reveal, or something else? And please subscribe to Afro Soul Stories because we're here to tell the love stories that mainstream media ignores. The stories of African women in Korea who refuse to be invisible, who find love in the most unexpected places, and who remind us all that your background doesn't determine your destiny. Your subscription means these stories keep getting told, and trust us, the next one will leave you just as breathless. See you soon.